Hi, I'm Isaac, the Toolbox Community Manager, and welcome to this, Step 7 in our series of how-to tutorials for the Toolbox. The Toolbox is an 8-step process to help anyone implement a sustainability strategy within their organisation, no matter the size or sector. In this video, we'll be taking you through all the resources in Step 7 of the Toolbox methodology. The assets contained within Step 7 include the how-to guide, the quick guide, the case studies, and 11 tracker templates to contribute to effective and credible reporting. There's the KPI tracker, the HR tracker, the climate action tracker, the internal audit tracker, and the greenhouse gas emissions calculator. Then, feeding into the greenhouse gas emissions calculator, we have a number of quantitative trackers to take account of consumption. That is the shipping tracker, the travel tracker, the accommodation tracker, the fuel tracker, electricity tracker, the water tracker, the waste tracker, the refrigerant tracker, and the materials tracker. As you implement your sustainability plan, it's important to keep track of the shortcomings and successes. This will allow you to fill in gaps and adapt as you journey through operational change, and also identify lessons to be learned for successive sustainability programs or for others in your industry. Step 7 allows you to monitor and evaluate your progress as you deliver your sustainability program. With an abundance of tools, this step allows you to deliver on holistic transformation of your business. It may be the case that your organisation does not need to use all of the trackers and tools in this step, but we have provided a comprehensive suite of trackers and audits to help you assess the progress pertinent to your issues and targets. Tracking your progress acts as a mechanism for continuous improvement and is critical to the understanding of your program, helping you identify gaps in your progress and learn lessons. This quick guide outlines the importance of assessing your progress and describes the 3 steps of effective monitoring. Compiling data relative to all of your targets, you can use the information to gauge your progress using established industry protocols. Then, thinking on our targets, we can compare the results and can make internal audits to identify the gaps in the progress of our sustainability plan. The 3rd step is to evaluate your performance, conduct a management review, and address any outstanding non-conformities. Remember, if there are any trends in the data that indicate that you can make small changes, you should make these as quickly as possible. Addressing an impact early makes it so much easier to resolve further down the line. This how-to guide goes deeper into these 3 processes, giving you examples of measurement protocols and tools. Here we have an overview of how to compare your results to your targets and deadlines, and conduct internal audits to provide feedback loops and identify missing information, and methods for evaluating performance, conducting internal management reviews, and comprehensively addressing non-conformity issues. The quote at the top left outlines that each problem has hidden in it an opportunity so powerful that it literally dwarfs the problem. The greatest success stories are created by people who recognized a problem and turned it into an opportunity. So what we are doing through monitoring and tracking our sustainability plan's progress is ensuring that all opportunities necessary to achieving our goals have been identified. There are also case studies which follow how other users implemented the step when they used the Toolbox methodology, giving you a like-for-like example of how to go through the process. So, to kick off this video, let's look in our Toolbox and have a deep dive into our carbon calculator. This is the carbon calculator, your one-stop dashboard to work out your carbon footprint. This tool is designed to be a dashboard to make it easier to synthesize your data into a carbon footprint. You don't need to change any of the information on this page. We only need to insert our operational data into the subordinate tabs at the bottom, and the calculation brings up the cumulative total of carbon footprints here. Easy, right? In column A, we have listed all the tracking activities and colour-coded them by Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3. To quickly recap on the scopes, according to the Carbon Trust, Scope 1 emissions cover the direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 emissions cover the indirect emissions from the generation of purchased electricity, steam, heating and cooling consumed by the reporting company. Scope 3 includes all other indirect emissions in a company's value chain. Scope 3 also includes well to tank, or WTT, which are the emissions made transporting fuels to your point of use. Our calculator also leaves space for you to define additional criteria for tracking. Columns B to M track your month-by-month consumption for the different emissions activities, and are again informed by the information provided in the tabs at the bottom. Columns N and O allow you to observe how much CO2 has been emitted through that activity. Column P stipulates how much that activity is proportional to your total emissions. Your overall carbon emissions footprint is produced in cell R43, along with all of your month-by-month totals in the same row. Scrolling down, you will also find a bar chart showing your consumption month by month, and a pie chart that shows the distribution of emissions for the whole year. You can use this information to evaluate if you are on track to meet your targets. So, how do we get these numbers? You should collect data on your organization's activities using the other trackers or your pre-existing internal processes. The carbon calculator then uses a decimal factor provided by the UK government to work out what those emissions are. You can find these factors at the bottom of each tab. For example, let's say your organisation takes 500 kilowatt hours from the national grid in January. The UK government outlines that for every 1 kilowatt hours produced by the national grid, a byproduct of 0.19338 kilograms of carbon is emitted. The calculator then multiplies this factor by 500, your organisation's consumption, and comes out with a figure of 96.69 kilograms of CO2. This data is then pulled through the carbon calculator tab into the appropriate row. The Toolbox updates the carbon calculator with the UK greenhouse gas conversion factors each year, and our updated tracker is released after the UK factors are released. Also, other countries have their own specific conversion factors. Should you need to update the carbon calculator yourself or change the carbon factors for a different country, instructions are provided in the Instructions tab. All the tabs are in the same format to track emissions by each of your organisation's activities. As you can see at the bottom, they are all colour-coded for scopes 1, 2 and 3. There are also tabs to help you convert measurements so that all your data is uniform. So this is how we synthesize all of the data. But how do we record it? Well, let's have a look at the Toolbox trackers to find out how. The trackers in step 7 of the Toolbox have all been designed for you to keep track of your supply and value chain and the consumption thereof. They all follow a similar format, starting with the date of the activity, then followed by the supporting information to help you keep track and to stay accountable. Outside of this scope, there is also a HR tracker. The HR tracker is here to help you evaluate any EDI targets you may have. You should fill these trackers in as completely as possible and designate an individual or team to be in charge of updating them with an established frequency, using the data to calculate your carbon and make regular analysis and observation. So that is how we ensure that we are monitoring, evaluating and analysing all of our data. But when we see red flags and can't identify the trends, how can we take a granular look at our operations to see where our sustainability plan is succeeding and where it is falling short? This is where the internal audit comes in. The audit template is a checklist to assess the processes, procedures and resources you've put in place for your sustainability plan to come to fruition. This template is designed to audit an ISO 20121 Events Sustainability Management System. It's important to note that the categories, headers and content are provided for example and are indicative only. We encourage you to use this template to create a checklist for other organisational standards you intend to meet. In this internal audit, there are 14 sections to complete, and they are divided by organisation and context, stakeholders, scope, leadership, roles and responsibilities, issues, objectives, competency, communication, documented information, supply chain management, measurement methods, internal audit procedure, and management review. Once you've filled in this audit, you should add the gaps and non-conformities to the non-conformance register to inform the continual improvement of your sustainability programme. Also, record and report non-conformities and learnings to management for the next sustainability reporting cycle. Bringing this all together year on year is the Climate Action Tracker. This template helps you see your organisation's climate action against your wider macro strategy, and also helps you see your progress against net zero targets. This template is intended to be the tracking dashboard you can refer to year after year. Along with your sustainability plan, you can use this to prove to external auditors or certifiers that you understand and are in control of reducing your climate impact to the standard you seek to achieve or maintain. There are 6 tabs to keep track of your broader strategic process. Those tabs are the Documents Register, Process, Inventory Boundaries, Climate Pathway Actions, and Climate Pathway Graphs. First, the Documents Register is a place for you to store all documents relevant to the delivery of the sustainability strategy and should be continuously compiled as your plan continues to evolve. The Process tab helps you define a task list for the delivery of your sustainability program each year. You can change the frequency of this cycle, but we would recommend an annual basis or in line with your established reporting cycle. In the Inventory Boundaries tab, you will define the scope and boundaries of what will be monitored and tracked each reporting cycle. These are, in part, dictated by your organisation's financial and legal boundaries. Your organisation could be a wholly owned operation, a joint venture, incorporated or non-incorporated, a subsidiary, or something else. Read the definitions and use the Read More reference to understand your organisational control and the appropriate methods you should use to define the activities and operations in your scope. You can select the organisational control and apply it to your organisation in cell E9. Your company should choose a method for consolidating greenhouse gas emissions and consistently apply this method to determine the activities and operations that are part of the company for greenhouse gas emissions accounting and reporting. You can add the physical boundaries of your scope. These are, in turn, your operations. Next, add the tracking cycle timeline under the timeline header. Use the inclusion column to outline which activities you will make measurements for and add the limits and boundaries alongside. This will give you a clear structure to make your carbon calculations in the next tab. The Climate Pathway Actions tab allows you to track the initiatives and changes you have made in regards to carbon, consumption, and all other operational realms defined in your sustainability plan. To get started, add the year along with your total expenditure to cells B10 and B11 respectively. Then, copy over carbon data from the baseline year column in rows B and C. Remember, you can cross-reference your annual expenditure with your carbon emissions to work out a figure for total CO2 equivalent per dollar spent. You'll notice that the grid is aligned with the same carbon sectors in the carbon calculator template. For successive years, expand the toggle icon above row D. Expand and enter the data for those years, entering the year and the budget in rows 10 and 11. For the current year, enter the data, then expand columns M through V. You'll see there are drop-down toggle buttons next to the emissions sectors. You can toggle them all open and closed here in the top left of the sheet. Here you can insert initiatives undertaken to make greenhouse gas reductions and the carbon output for that year. There are 3 under each sector, but you can copy rows to add more if required. Add in the planned initiatives for the current year and successive years in line with the required target reduction pathway and change their completion status in row X. You can do likewise in the successive years. If you have more than one carbon calculator for more than one area of operation, you can duplicate this tab to represent other operational data. In the next tab, we will use this data and input yearly totals to create graphs. These will allow you to compare year on year your organisation's cumulative carbon reduction pathway. The Climate Pathway Graphs tab allows you to use data visualizations to compare your organisation's current trajectory to a simplified pathway aligned with your carbon reduction targets. The net zero pathway outlined is a simplified 1.5 degree net zero pathway using the absolute contraction for all sectors method in line with the UNFCCC's reduction targets of 50% carbon emissions reduction by 2030 and net zero carbon emissions by 2040. From the baseline year for all operations, pull over the total carbon footprint data for total CO2 emitted and kilogram of CO2 per dollar spent, and insert it into rows 6 through 8. Next, for every operation you have a climate pathway for, enter the total CO2 equivalent carbon footprint data from their respective baseline year into both Organisation Current Trajectory and UNFCCC Net Zero Pathway in column C. Our first operation sits here in rows 13 and 14. Every year or cycle, add your carbon footprint data to plot points to this chart to monitor your progress. These data points will create a simplified carbon reduction aligned pathway in the graphs above using your baseline data. The 3 graphs will project your organisation's climate action pathway against the 1.5 degree net zero pathway, and you can use this visualisation to assess progress and address where additional resources may be required. These data and visualisations can also be included in your sustainability reports when communicating your progress towards net zero targets. So those were the tools to help you track your progress of your sustainability plan in step 7. You should now have an understanding of how to use the Toolbox trackers against your organisation's targets. This includes tracking your carbon data in the short term using the carbon calculator and tracking it over a wider timescale with the climate action tracker. In the next step, we will look at how we can take all of this information and compile it into a report, and also how we can create a communications plan to share all of our progress with our stakeholders. If you need any help with the supporting resources in step 7, don't hesitate to send us an email at info@sustainabilitytoolbox.com and we'll be happy to support you there. Remember, if you can't measure it, you can't tackle it. So this is one of the most important steps of our sustainability program. For now, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon.